What if the person standing next to you at your grandmother's funeral wasn't just grieving, but recording? Let that sit for a second. A room heavy with silence. Heads bowed. Cameras banned. Phones discouraged. Emotions raw. History closing a chapter. And yet, according to explosive claims whispered behind palace walls, something was still running. Quietly. Invisibly. Listening. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because if this story is true, even in part, then this isn't just about family drama. It's about betrayal at the most sacred moment imaginable. And it's about the instant one brother decided the other was no longer family. This is not a loud story. It doesn't begin with shouting or headlines or leaked screenshots. It begins with a feeling, a sense that something was off. A look that lingered too long. A pause in conversation that didn't make sense. And eventually, a realization so chilling that it changed the future of the British royal family forever. Here's the question no one wants to ask out loud. What if Prince Harry didn't just walk away from the royal family, but recorded his way out? For years, the public has watched this family fracture in slow motion. Interviews, books, docuseries, carefully chosen words, carefully omitted ones. And always, the sense that there was more happening behind closed doors than we were being told. But what if the missing piece wasn't a secret conversation? What if it was a recording of one? According to allegations now circulating among royal insiders, aides, and commentators, Prince William was eventually told something that stopped him cold. Not a rumor, not a media spin, something tangible, something technical, something that couldn't be explained away as misunderstanding or hurt feelings. The claim is simple and devastating, that Harry secretly recorded private conversations with senior members of the royal family. Conversations with his father, King Charles, with Camilla, with William himself, and most shockingly, conversations that allegedly took place during the period surrounding Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. Not for memory, not for clarity, but, allegedly, for content. And if that's true, then this story isn't about who said what in public. It's about what was never meant to leave the room. Ask yourself this. Why did certain lines in the Netflix series feel too precise, too emotionally timed? Why did some exchanges feel reconstructed, almost scripted, as if the speakers didn't realize they were being listened to? At the time, many brushed it off. Editing, creative license, memory, trauma. But what if those scenes weren't reconstructed from memory at all? What if they were reconstructed from audio? That's the allegation that, once raised, could never be unraised. And it matters now more than ever, because it reframes everything. It reframes William's icy distance. It reframes the palace's refusal to engage. It reframes why doors once left cracked open were suddenly slammed shut without explanation. It reframes why, according to sources, William stopped trying to reconcile and instead focused on something else entirely: containment. Because families can survive arguments. They don't survive surveillance. Let's rewind for a moment. Queen Elizabeth II's death was not just a personal loss. It was a constitutional moment, a global event, a carefully choreographed transition of power layered on top of private grief. Every movement was planned, every interaction scrutinized, and every senior royal was briefed on one thing above all else: discretion. This was not the time for freelancing, not the time for side projects, and certainly not the time for recording devices. Phones were discouraged. Some areas restricted them outright. Conversations were meant to be safe, sacred, off the record. And that's what makes the allegations so disturbing. Because if someone chose that moment, that setting, to record, then this wasn't accidental. It wasn't casual. It was intentional. And intention changes everything. At first, no one wanted to believe it. Aides noticed small things. A hand slipping into a pocket. A device held at an odd angle. A jacket that never seemed to leave Harry's side. But suspicion alone isn't proof. And accusing a prince, especially at a funeral, is not something anyone does lightly. So they watched. They waited. And they said nothing. Until something happened that forced the issue. According to those familiar with the internal atmosphere at the time, there was a moment when a senior aide made a quiet report. Not an accusation. A concern. Something unusual. Something that didn't align with protocol. That report didn't go to the press. It went up the chain. And eventually, it reached the one person who mattered most. Prince William. Imagine that moment. You are grieving your grandmother. You are stepping into the weight of future kingship. You are holding together a family that has been tearing itself apart for years. And then you are told that your own brother may have been recording private conversations. Not with strangers. With you. What do you feel first? Anger? Disbelief? Or something colder? Because according to multiple accounts, William's reaction was not explosive. He didn't storm down corridors or confront Harry in public. He didn't leak. He didn't shout. He went quiet. And anyone who understands power knows that silence can be far more dangerous than rage. From that moment on, the tone shifted. Not visibly, not immediately, but decisively. Harry wasn't confronted right away. Instead, steps were taken behind the scenes. Protocols tightened, access narrowed, and one object, small, ordinary, easily overlooked, became the focus of intense concern. A device. What kind of device? That depends on who you ask. Some suggest a phone modified for discrete recording. Others whisper about a secondary recorder entirely. The details vary, but the core claim remains the same. That something was confiscated. Quietly. No scene. No headlines. No explanation. Just gone. And if that's true, it raises a question far more unsettling than the act of recording itself. How much had already been captured? Because here's the thing about recordings. You don't need many to change everything. One conversation, one unguarded moment, one sentence spoken in grief. That's all it takes to reframe a relationship forever. And then came the realization that reportedly shattered whatever remained of William's trust. The fear wasn't just that Harry had recorded them. It was that he might have shared those recordings. With whom? That question hung in the air like smoke. Producers, editors, lawyers, people who would never have been in the room otherwise. People who weren't family. And suddenly, lines from the Netflix series didn't just feel dramatic. They felt invasive. Too intimate. Too informed. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever watched a scene and thought, how could they possibly know that? At the time, many viewers assumed it was emotional recall or creative reconstruction. But what if it wasn't? What if parts of those scenes were shaped by something far more concrete? Something recorded in confidence? If so, then this wasn't just about telling one's truth. It was about selling someone else's. And that is where the story crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. Because families argue. Families fall out. But families do not survive monetized betrayal. This is the context in which one sentence, allegedly spoken by Prince William, takes on terrifying weight. You're not family anymore. Not shouted. Not dramatized. Delivered coldly. Final. Not as punishment. As protection. Protection of the institution. Protection of the remaining family. Protection against something far worse than bad press. The fear that nothing said in private would ever be private again. And here's the cruel irony. If Harry truly believed he was preserving truth, he may have ended up preserving something else entirely. The exact moment his last bridge burned. Because from that point on, the palace didn't move emotionally. It moved strategically. Damage control began. Not publicly. Internally. Legal conversations. Security reviews. Quiet recalibrations of access and trust. And Harry? He said nothing. No direct denial. No explicit explanation. Just silence. And sometimes, silence is the loudest confirmation of all. But this story doesn't end there. Because the most unsettling question wasn't whether recordings existed. It was whether they still do. And if they do, who has them? Because if one device was discovered, how can anyone be sure there weren't others? That question, according to insiders, still haunts the palace. It's the reason certain conversations never happen. The reason reconciliation remains frozen. The reason William's expression hardened in ways the public noticed but couldn't explain. Because once trust is replaced by suspicion, the damage is permanent. And the tragedy is this. Even if the recordings are gone, even if nothing more is ever released, the silence they created will never leave. But this was only the beginning. Because before the device was confiscated, before William was told, before trust collapsed entirely, there was a rule everyone knew. A rule meant to prevent exactly this. No phones, no exceptions. And the moment that rule was allegedly broken would set off a chain reaction no one could stop. But what happened next, behind the scenes, away from cameras, during the most carefully controlled days in royal history, would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What kind of family has to remind itself not to record its own grief? That sounds like a strange question, doesn't it? Almost absurd. And yet, inside the royal family, it's not strange at all. It's policy. It's protocol. It exists for a reason. And that reason is history. Because when you're part of an institution built on secrecy, leaks aren't accidents. They're threats. Long before Queen Elizabeth II's death, royal funerals followed a strict, unspoken code. No freelancing. No improvisation. And above all else, no unauthorized recordings. Not audio. Not video. Not just in case. Why? Because grief loosens tongues. And loose tongues, in royal history, have toppled marriages, shattered reputations, and rewritten public trust. So when the Queen died, the rules weren't relaxed. They were tightened. Phones were discouraged outright. In certain settings, they were effectively banned. Aides were briefed. Security was doubled. Conversations were meant to be safe. Contained. Temporary. This wasn't paranoia. It was survival. The royal family had already been burned too many times. By books. By interviews. By carefully curated truths that somehow always seemed to leave others exposed. So when the family gathered in those days, behind palace walls, inside cars, in private rooms where the cameras weren't supposed to go, there was an assumption. A fragile one, but an assumption nonetheless. What's said here stays here. And that assumption is what makes this story so unsettling. Because if someone broke that rule, they didn't just break protocol. They broke the final remaining trust. Picture the scene. Not the televised one. Not the processions, or the black coats, or the solemn nods. Forget the public version for a moment. Picture the in-between moments. The hushed conversations in corridors. The low voices in cars. The pauses before difficult sentences. The moments when titles drop away and you're just a son, a brother, a widow, a family trying to breathe through loss. These are the moments that matter. These are the moments no one prepares speeches for. And these are the moments the rules are meant to protect. Royal aides know this better than anyone. Many of them have served for decades. They've watched generations grieve. They've seen arguments flare and then dissolve into silence. They know when to step back. And they know when to watch closely. During the days surrounding the Queen's funeral, they were watching everything. Not suspiciously, carefully, because tension was already high. Harry's return to the UK was never going to be simple. The wounds were still fresh. The Netflix cameras were still in recent memory. The book was either written or being written. Trust was already thin. And yet, despite everything, there was still a line everyone believed wouldn't be crossed. Until something didn't feel right. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic gasp. No caught-in-the-act moment where someone shouted, "He's recording." It was subtler than that. An aide noticed Harry's posture during a conversation. Slightly angled. One shoulder forward. A hand lingering in a pocket longer than necessary. At first, it meant nothing. People fidget when they're nervous. Grief makes everyone strange. Then there was another moment. A conversation paused unexpectedly. Someone stopped mid-sentence. Camilla, reportedly, hesitated. Not because of what she was saying, but because of how it felt to say it. As if the room had changed temperature. Have you ever had that feeling? When a space suddenly feels less safe, even though nothing obvious has happened. That. And then there was the jacket. Harry's jacket became a quiet point of interest. It rarely left his side, even indoors, even when others relaxed. Again, not proof. Just unusual. Aides noticed. They always do. Still, no one said anything. Because accusing a prince, especially at a funeral, is not something anyone wants to get wrong. So they waited. And the waiting is what makes this part so disturbing. Because it suggests that if something was happening, it wasn't impulsive. It was sustained. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If someone is recording impulsively, they slip up. If someone is recording deliberately, they're careful. And careful people don't get caught immediately. The rules around devices exist not just to prevent leaks, but to preserve honesty. Royals speak differently when they believe they are alone. They admit doubts. They vent. They contradict public positions. They speak as humans, not symbols. Strip that privacy away, and what you get isn't transparency. You get performance. And that's the irony at the heart of this entire story. Because the person who has spoken most about truth and authenticity may have created a situation where no one around him felt they could speak freely ever again. Now, here's where things get complicated. Not everyone agrees on exactly when suspicions solidified. Some say it was during a car ride. Others suggest it happened during a private briefing. A few claim it was after someone replayed a memory from the Netflix series and realized it aligned too perfectly with something said in confidence days earlier. But everyone agrees on this. Once the concern was raised, it could not be dismissed. And so the information moved upward, quietly, from aide to senior aide, from senior aide to private secretary, from private secretary to the person who needed to know, Prince William. Before we get to his reaction, there's something important to understand. William doesn't leak. He doesn't freelance. He doesn't vent to the press.